All right, welcome back into another edition of the Newport This Week podcast. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Remember, you can check out past episodes of our podcast on YouTube or just visit newportthisweek.com and you'll find each and every one right there. Today, a really cool conversation with Franklin Vagnone, and we're talking about the Newport Restoration Foundation and specifically the Vernon House. But before we go there, for everyone out there, just give us a synopsis of what exactly is the Newport Restoration Foundation and sort of differentiate it from some of the other historic property organizations that exist on the island.
No, thanks for asking that question, because NRF, for short, Newport Restoration Foundation, was founded by Doris Duke in the late 60s. It was really founded as a kind of economic and urban development foundation to stop mass destruction of Newport, so developers weren't able to come in, tear down all of the historic structures and put up strip shopping centers or big apartment complexes. And so what Doris Duke did is she and her advisors went through the Point and Historic Hill and literally bought houses on the corners and mid-block. So if you looked at it, it would look like a salt and pepper shaker throughout all of the city. But what she did was single-handedly stop massive destruction of Newport. So NRF really at its core is a kind of economic and urban development idea, which was really new at the time, because as you know, at that time, developers were coming in and just destroying cities. She stopped it, which is the reason why Newport looks the way it does today. And so, you know, other things snowballed. We got other historic sites. We eventually got her summer cottage, which is one of the great mansions on Bellevue. So we show that. And eventually another one of the houses that we were gifted is the Vernon House, which is what that story in the paper is about.
I think that's such a key element, is that Newport looks the way it does because of work that was both in a donation standpoint, from a gifting standpoint, but also from a maintenance standpoint. And it's intentional that Newport looks the way it does now, and that it has survived the test of time where, boy, you know, you can make an argument that some of the historic properties in Newport, they could be a Whole Foods and, you know, a movie theater and things like that.
And in fact, that's exactly what the kind of horizon looked like. And there is some research that has shown that there was an interest in either massive urban development of Newport or selective demolition to make it like a colonial Williamsburg. And it was at that point that a group of people, Doris Duke being one of the primary ones, said that they wanted Newport to be a real city. They wanted it to remain a place that people lived their lives. And that's when they stepped in. And another kind of interesting aside is this happened before the National Trust for Historic Preservation was formed. It really happened as this kind of spearheading of preservation nationally. And Newport was kind of on at the very beginnings of it, giving an alternative way for cities to embrace their heritage and still make money and have tourism and all of that without demolishing everything. So it was really significantly important from a national level, although not a lot of people know that. It kind of faded into the background because other cities said, hey, let's start doing it this way.
Very interesting background there. And for Newporters and Newport visitors alike, it really is the identity of the city on so many levels. It's not the entire identity of the city. Obviously, you can talk sailing, you can talk the aspect of things, you can talk small business, restaurants, whatever. All of that, though, is encapsulated in this weird, unique space that has all of these historic buildings. Again, very intentional.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because preservation has evolved. You know, when Doris Duke and her group started buying these houses to really stop development and push economic redevelopment, the restoration work that she was doing was really unheard of. So she was taking like houses like the President's house that I live in. I think there were like 3 or 4 different apartments in this one house. And so what happened was that there was this kind of shift in occupancy. And what's happening now is because of the economics of Newport, these houses which have been traditionally full year-round residence houses. We rent out all the houses to help fuel the restoration costs of maintaining them, that the houses are getting so expensive and the fair market value is so expensive that any of these houses that are sold, there is this really unfortunate movement to kind of gut renovate, which is to just keep the exterior wall and gut the interior. Some cases that's necessary, but most cases it's not. And so it's a really unfortunate move that's happening economically, and it also is related to affordable housing. So it's interesting, once again, here we are in our current time dealing with exactly the same economic and urban redevelopment issues that Doris Duke and her group were dealing with in 1968. Like it hasn't changed. It's gone full circle.
Really interesting stuff. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the Vernon House, which is the latest project, so to speak, in the simplest terms. Talk about the project there and what it means to the public.
Sure. The Vernon House is probably one of the most significant colonial houses in all of Newport, and NRF was lucky to be gifted it through a will. And for the last handful of years, they've been doing a kind of historic structures report, finding out all about it and what it needed in terms of restoration work. And they really didn't know exactly what to do with it. Well, I was just hired almost exactly a year to the day. July 13th is when I was officially started. And when I jumped in, I realized the importance of Vernon House in many ways exceeded it being used as a traditional period house, which had a very limited use and a limited kind of public awareness. And I said, you know, I really think of the Vernon House as this witness to social change. And remember, everything I just told you about NRF is that NRF has been deeply embedded in community redevelopment. And I thought, why don't we, instead of restoring this as a period house, stabilize it and use it as this kind of incubator, this catalyst for social commentary, interaction, discussion, and interpretation. They like the idea. And so this is the first move for NRF using the Vernon House as this place of dialogue. And in this case, the dialogue are international contemporary artists coming into the space, being given a kind of concept of card playing as social interaction, and all of them producing work that speak to one another and speak to the house. So this is really our first jump into this house of witness idea. So when you come to Vernon House, not only is it the first time the house has ever been open to the public in this way, but it's also the first time that contemporary art has been really deeply embedded into the architectural structure of the house.
Really cool stuff. So how can the public see this incredible operation that you've got going here?
Well, it's funny you say that, the operation. We had no idea how much had to be done to the Vernon House just to unlock the door and let the public in. Temporary shoring, you know, all kinds of stuff. But here we are, we're open. We're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 10 in the morning until 4. And you can just walk in. We're actually doing it for free. It's a really significant partnership with Art in Newport. So they're bringing the contemporary artists and we're bringing the historic space. And this collaboration is all about the kind of dovetailing of the past with this new interpretation of what the conversations can be for the future.
And in terms of the future, I guess, from your standpoint right now, it's obviously impossible to predict, and it's even to read trends right now is very difficult. As you mentioned, housing crisis, there are so many competing factors, but where do you see preservation of historic properties going in Newport as we move into the next decade or so?
That is so unfair, right? This is like an hour-long conversation to answer that question. I would say that Newport is really significantly placed at the center of this deeper conversation about how preservation has contributed in some ways to limiting access to buildings, historic districts, in an attempt to preserve things. And I'm talking about, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, the beginnings of preservation, and it's certainly changed. That there was an elitism quality about preservation, which also meant that you had to be moneyed to participate in preservation. Well, at NRF, we don't believe that at all, right? We've been renting out these houses and maintaining them for all of us normal people since we started. I think that Newport is really seriously thinking about how this historic fabric can help deal with affordable housing. At NRF, we're looking at a handful of houses either being modified into multifamily, or we have some that are already multifamily, how those rents can be affordable. We believe that preservation can be part of the solution for the housing situation. So preservation might have been a part of the problem before. And I also absolutely believe, which is one of the reasons why I came to NRF, that preservation can be part of that solution. You just have to really choose to participate in trying something. If it fails, try it again.
Yeah, really well said. And I completely agree. Franklin Vagnone, Newport Restoration Foundation, thanks so much for your time this morning, and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.